I don't think about it, and I get questions like that all the time. Failure just isn't in my mindset. Failure means not being able to feed my family, not being able to pay our bills. That's literally not an option. I could either look at it as a very stressful thing and say, oh my gosh, if I don't do this, like bad things are gonna happen. Or I can say, dude, you just wait. Just give us a couple more days. Like, we're gonna fucking knock it out of the park. We're gonna just it's gonna work. Like, it has to work,
I'm with you.
We've already done this before. There's no reason it wouldn't work again.
Hello, and welcome to the $1 Million Electrician Podcast, where we help home service pros like you supercharge your business and spark up those sales.
I'm Joseph Lucani, and together with my co-host, Clay Newmeyer, we're here to share the secrets that have helped electricians sell over $1 million from a single service van.
Now it's time for sales. It's time for scale. It's time to become $1 million electrician. Welcome back, guys, to another great episode of the $1 Million Electrician, joined by my co-host, Joseph Lucani. But also we have another special guest today. This one's quite a deep topic, a bit of a sensitive story, but also really empowering. And I know it's going to touch so many people and help so many. So I want to welcome, a warm welcome to you, Andy Keil, for coming to the show today. Welcome, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Such a pleasure.
Yeah, man. By the way, how's it going over in California today?
California is awesome. The weather's good. Business is nonstop. So
awesome. Good to hear it. So guys, I'll give you a little bit of background on Andy, what we're getting into today. We recently had a guest on, Forrest, who's been working with a lot of the SLE Pro App members, doing some marketing stuff. Forrest with Top Line Growth, and he's actually a partner with Andy in Keil Electric. And together they've been building a really strong foundation to a great company in that area in California. But it's not Andy's first kick at this. I've had a few iterations of businesses before, learned a ton. This is your first partnership business, I think, Andy, is that right?
Correct.
Awesome. And so we're going to go through a ton of what Andy's learned through the process of having very little sales at times, a lot of challenges at times. And I believe you were over in Texas even at one point. And so, Andy, we're going to get to go through that whole story with you today and learn everything we can about what makes Keil Electric great today and what makes you such a great operator, as all I've heard is great feedback on how good you're doing there, man.
Cool.
Awesome. So tell us a bit about your background and why electrical in the first place, brother.
Well, I was in the military, not anything related to electrical, but as soon as I got out, I got my feet into the construction side of the world. And I was actually just a helper on a construction site, sweeping, like the lowest job ever you can get. And there was this old timer electrician, he was probably in his late 50s, early 60s, who was trying to pull wire by himself because his helper wasn't there. He's just cussing. He's just like really mad because he's pulling in some pretty big wire. And he asked me if I can help him for a minute. So I went over there and helped him pull in the wire. Didn't know what I was doing. I was just following what he was asking. And then my boss came over and said, what the heck are you doing? I'm not paying you to work with the subcontractor. And then he fired me right there on the spot. So the electrician I was helping hired me. I just stayed there, kept working, and I worked with him for about 4 more years. And that was the beginning of, my experience turning into an electrician.
That has got to be the fastest turnover ever. Literally, like, you're fired. You're hired. All right, great. It's like, all right, bye. You're staying on the same job site.
Yeah, I went from like a minimum wage to a few bucks more. So I was stoked,
Best firing ever.
So the guy who fired you has to continue working or seeing you on site because you just continued right there with the other guy.
Yeah, he did. He was actually really cool about it. He was like, you got lucky, you moved into a better position. So he wasn't a jerk about it. He was nice.
Okay, so you never looked back. How long did you work for that electrician for?
I did 4 years, and then he retired. He wanted me to take over the business so that he could collect some cash, and I did that for a little bit. I would say about 1.5 years. I didn't know anything about business. I knew zero. So it didn't last that long to say. And then I ended up working for a project that we did. We did a project out in Newport Beach, California, where we built a hotel. And I knew every part of the electrical system for the hotel. So then the hotel hired me to be their electrical engineer. So I did that for about 2.5 years. And I got really bored because it was just sitting at a desk and meeting after meeting about budgets. And I learned a little bit about business and financing through that. And at the same time, I was doing side work. So on the weekends, I would be making $2,000 or $3,000 a weekend. And I was just making, decent money at the hotel. So my wife said one day, she's like, what if you did electrical every day and took the weekend off so you can have some time with your family? And that was pretty much the pivot point where I decided to get my license and see what I can pull off. So
good advice.
That's that's a timeout moment. I was going to say, most of our wives aren't the ones dreaming of us starting our own companies. That's been my experience. But I guess if your weekends were taken, that would be a treat for her and the fam, hey?
Yeah, she was stoked because I was just making basic money, 9-to-5 job, and I was making more money in 2 days than I was in a whole week. So
You mentioned military. So that happened before the electrical trade. Is that right?
yeah, right out of high school, I joined the Army, and
Wow.
they showed me a video of stuff blowing up, and I thought that looked cool, so I signed up for that. It was a field artillery. And then we moved to upstate New York, and I think that's where you're from, Joe.
Yeah, I was going to say, where in upstate New York? Like, where were you?
It was a town called Watertown. It was Fort Drum.
Okay,
I think
so
it
you're
was
north.
just north of Syracuse, yeah.
I mean, as far as being north, I mean, like Syracuse is pretty much as north as it gets. You're pretty close to Plattsburgh at that point then, right?
I don't know the name of that town. I know that if we wanted to go to Niagara Falls, it was about a 30-minute drive.
New York's a big place. It's a big place. As long as you're going up, it's big.
Anytime I tell people I lived in New York, they just think of the city. And I'm like, I've never been there. So
Well, that was my experience too when I flew. I flew to Toronto and drove south to Joseph, and I just didn't realize. I mean, that drive was like a whole day. That was significant. And I said the same thing, like, how close to the city are you?
Yeah.
And Joe was like, I hate the city. I don't go to the city. And we're like, what? We're not going to the city?
Yeah.
What?
No. You throw a neurodivergent,
yeah.
Throw an autistic person in the city, you've got a bad day. Too many
It's the only thing
crowds, too
people
many
think
bright
about.
lights, too many tall things, unfamiliar. Not about it. Not about it.
Okay, so you did the New York State thing, the Army thing. I get it. That you said 4 years.
I did 3 years, and it was about time to get out. And my wife said, no more, because we were from California. We went from beach weather all year to freezing more than half the year, and humidity. So she wasn't a fan. So we got out. Yeah.
Where to next, Andy? What happened next?
Got out, and I realized that my military service wasn't really a qualifying factor for anything. I applied to a bunch of jobs, unless I wanted to go in like law enforcement or border patrol, which I didn't. My resume just said I knew how to kill people and blow things up. So it was hard to find a job, except for the construction guys.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was such a problem. So they didn't really give you any trade skills then.
No, I mean, you're just a soldier, really, unless you go into a special skill set. Like they have electricians and construction type jobs in the military, but the one I chose was far from those.
So when you got into electrical, I know this started with just pulling a piece of wire and then, everything you said before, but at some point, did you realize like this is what you actually want to do with your life? Or is it just kind of one foot in front of the other, all of a sudden years have passed?
I got in, and I was in, I think on my 25th birthday, I think I was about 2 or 3 years in, and I started thinking about my life and my future and, what my retirement might look like. And I knew it took 4 years to get a journeyman's license. So I said, if I stick with this, by the time I'm 30, I should be qualified to be making more money. And at that time, getting a journeyman's license to me was you're in a higher pay bracket. I wasn't thinking of a career or a business at that point. It's just more money. So like I said, I did that with the same guy who brought me in, and that was my goal. I'm gonna work this until I'm retired and just be an electrician and work for a really good company, which was this guy. But then he came to me one day and said, "Hey man, I'm gonna retire. So you could either find another job, or if you want to try it, you can just continue with what I built and see what happens." So I said, "Well, I don't want to find another job. So let's see how this works out." I did that. Like I said, I did that for a couple years. I was the only guy running it, so I didn't know how to get calls or leads. It was really if they knew about the company prior, they would call. And then work just got slow, and I took the job with the hotel for a customer that we were there for about a year. And like I said, I did that, and side gigs on the weekend kind of turned into, hey, maybe you should do it during the week. And then that turned into, I don't really know how I'm running a business, or like what are taxes. And it was a try it until I figure it out type of moment. Yeah. 2009, we officially opened up our own company. I had to sell my house.
Really? 09 of all years, like in the height of the collapse? That's intense.
Well, see, the thing was, I was too young. I didn't look at politics or watch news. Like, I didn't know there was a collapse. I'm more of a self-create, if I want it, it'll happen type of mindset. So, I didn't know the world was breaking, and I didn't know everybody was losing their, finances and jobs. I just looked at, hey, we're going to start a business and it's going to be awesome. It was slow at the beginning. Like I said, I had to sell our house. We sat down and we said, we can't afford the house. We can't do this because you're only making X amount of dollars. But we didn't want to give up on it. So we sold the house, moved into a 1-bedroom, and just kept trucking along.
What was the plan? Can you take me back to that? And that's a big sacrifice. Oh, and we hear people do this before. I've made big sacrifices myself, but it's not about me today. What was the plan when you knew, hey, we can't do the house, we're going in on the business? Was there any like upgrade to how you were approaching the business at that time, or was it just more of the optimism pushing you through that?
There was a ton of optimism. At that time, I started getting into networking groups. I joined the Chamber of Commerce. I started hanging out with other business owners. We did have to look at our finances and what our bills looked like, and they were upside down. But the optimism and the forward future thinking of what it could become outweighed, what our current situation was. So we decided, what is it going to take? How much money do we need to survive if we downgraded? And it was much smaller footprint. So we said, let's do that so we can pursue our future. And we sold the house so fast. Like you said, I didn't know we were in a recession until we put the house for sale. It was gone in 3 days. We bought the house for much more than we sold it for. And I didn't know that. And at the time, like, we kind of didn't care. We were just kind of thinking, one day we're going to have this corporate building and 500 trucks and all these really awesome dudes, and we'll laugh at this sale. Um, and we did that. It was around 2009 that we downgraded, and then the business just started picking up. We started. I never marketed in a sense that like Forrest does. Forrest is a high level guy. We marketed on like Facebook, or I don't even think we used Facebook back then. But went on Yelp and some form of Google or whatever they had back then. But most of it was word of mouth. Like I would go to tons of networking groups throughout the city and just met people. I did door knocking by myself. I would go out and just pass out cards. I would throw cards in every place where you go to a coffee shop, you throw your card in there. I blasted our logo and our cards anywhere I can find a spot to throw it. And then when I wasn't doing that, I was making phone calls. I was calling property management companies and hotels. Actually, one of our biggest clients was the hotel that I left to start the company. They were super supportive. We made a lot of money doing that. yeah, and then we just kind of evolved.
Question I have for you, because I don't know if everyone really appreciated, but have you ever gone back years later and found your card was still on one of those plaques? The reason why I say that is we actually did something very, very similar, where we literally would get like laminated piece of paper and we'd tape it to different offices and shops and coffee shops. And there was one we found like 5, 6 years later that the guy just forgot about and never took down. We're like, oh, can we take this? Like, we're gonna take it. So, like, did you ever have that kind of experience where you're like, oh wait, I remember this business guy. It's still here. Awesome.
No, I mean, there's been a few times we would, like, places that we would regular, like coffee shops or like
Yeah.
old mom and pop cafes where we'd see our cards still pinned to the corkboard. Another big thing that I did was, and I don't even know where I got the idea, but I would drive around at night looking at parking facilities and like parking lots of like stores, and then I would see parking lot lights out. And then I would look for the vacant unit that was there, and it said, if you want to rent this place, call this property management company. So I would take photos, I would count how many lights were out, and then I would call those guys the next day and say, hey, you guys have some lights out, I can fix those for you. And then that led us into a door where we started doing all of their electrical maintenance for a lot of those companies. By that time, we started getting a lot of parking lot lighting projects. I invested into a bucket truck. And then I started hiring guys because I hired a guy to go out and like just look at parking lots. And then, I mean, we just kind of did this over and over again. And like I said, we just evolved. We started building Chase Banks, and Chase Bank did a big takeover, I think, back in those days where they started taking. So we got in with those guys and then putting out contracts. And then, yeah, we just kind of grew from there. I don't know if it was luck or good timing, but it worked out.
By the way, guys, what Andy just talked about is an example of niching down and just finding a specific service and committing to get your foot in the door. And I bet you it didn't stop at parking lot lights. Those same people probably hired you for more stuff too. Would you agree with that, Andy?
Yeah, I think the parking lot light was just the foot in the door, and then they were happy with our services and our prices that they started calling us for everything. From there, it led into going into an empty unit and getting it all fixed up and checking the power. And then that led into, hey, something's not working. Can you come out here? You're the guy that we call for everything. And then they would refer us to other companies and other property management companies, and you know.
Love it. Yeah, good stuff. So how big did this company get for you guys?
I had 16 guys at the first Keil Electric. Most of us were we did everything, technicians. We had one guy that
Comms.
did like Cat 6 phone type stuff. It wasn't something I knew, but we got a job one day and they said, hey, we need you to do this, and then we need to do the low voltage. And I said, of course I could do that. And I didn't know anything about it. So I went and I hired a guy. I'm like, hey, do you know anything about this stuff? He's like, yeah, it's what I do. I'm like, dude, you're hired. So we started offering that. That actually led into a big job for there's a city out here called Westminster, and one of the property companies was redoing all the city parks. It was a prevailing wage job, and they said, hey, you do a lot of work for my buddy. He was over here at this other company. Like, how do you feel about redoing all of our city parks? And I was like, yeah, sounds easy. And he's like, part of it is to be running. He's like, there's like 17 miles of fiber optic. Can you do fiber optic? And I said, yes. So he said, cool, I want you to come down and meet our guys at the city and talk to some of the engineers, and let's just kind of talk about the project. So they wanted to meet the next day. So I knew they were going to talk about fiber optic because it was the biggest ticket on their thing. So on the way there driving, before you weren't allowed to hold your phone while you're driving, I was watching YouTube videos on how fiber optic is spliced, what type of tools you need. Pretty much enough to, I guess, BS my way into the meeting. So they started talking. I was like, yeah, you need this type of tool. You need like a dark room, and like we can get it done. It's not something that we do all the time, but I have a team that can do it. So they're like, cool. I put in my bid. I think it was around $3 million for the electrical package for 17 city parks plus the fiber optic package. And we got the job. We were on that job for about a year and a half. I'm sure if they watch this video, they'd be like, what the heck, man?
But it's so cool that you're willing to take that, because the way I see it is that's like risk management. You knew there was a huge reward if you managed to get in, and if you didn't, well, you might just still be unemployed or where stuck where you were. But you took a gamble and said, I can do the thing, and I'm willing to learn the thing before you can test me on it. That takes some stones, man. Like, good for you.
I just figured worst case scenario is I didn't get the job, or I did get the job and I failed miserably, maybe go bankrupt or sued. But I thought, why not? Let's give it a shot. But it worked out. I didn't really make as much money as I bid. I thought I would make more. I ended up paying a lot more extra money for people to do the professional thing that I said I could do, but we didn't lose money. In fact, that led into more city jobs and more referrals to other companies. And soon after that, we were building apartments and hotel type work. So
When you look back at that now, you guys do mostly residential service today, right? Do you miss that hotel, the bigger project stuff? Do you ever get the itch to go back to fiber optics? What do you feel about that today?
it took me actually meeting Forrest kind of shifted me. I always looked at the job and the dollar amount that we bid it for, and I think, oh, cool. This is how much it's going to take to do the job. This is how much we should have when we're left over. I would look at that a lot and get really excited. And then I look back at it now, and how much time and effort it took to do those massive jobs, and stress and headache and time away from the family. The final product isn't as appealing as when you see it in the beginning on a piece of paper. And now we do, like, I like to compare an ADU. It's like we can go I'll bid an ADU from time to time, and we'll bid it for $45,000, a small ADU. And it takes months because you're waiting on all the other trades to do their part, and you come in phases. By the time it's all said and done, you probably walked away with like $8,000. I could go install the generator now and charge like 25, 30,000 bucks. It takes 2 or 3 days. And like I could 100% see what our profit margin is going to be at before we even start the job. Like it's the same price projects. One is significantly easier, and one is, just keeping the guys busy. So switching over to service and repair has just kind of been a big eye opener. Just a lot more work into it. You got to hustle a little bit more because your customer comes and goes, in a day or two, and you got to repeat the customer or find more customers. So you're not sitting on the project for a long time, but I think the reward is much, much greater.
Yeah, that was my experience too with a lot of projects in the background. It always seemed the best time that we celebrated projects was just like you said, when we were awarded them, when it was still just projections before all the change management and all the battles on site and all the schedule conflicts and problems along the way and the people getting sick and every problem in between, let alone fighting for your pay 60, 90 days out at the end of it, bankroll that. Gosh, I just don't miss it. I just, oh gosh. Okay, so how long did you do this for, Andy? How long did that version of Keil Electric go for?
I think in around 2016, when me and my wife decided to start building kids. We had one, and we were still in California. I think when she turned around one, we decided to make more, but we didn't want to have kids in California. There was just a lot of rules and regulations and how they wanted to tell you how to raise your children. So we decided to exit to Texas. And I had a really good superintendent and a co-manager in California. So I said, and we were in the middle of an apartment building. I was like, I'm going to let you and the team run this. I'm going to run it remotely. Most of my days were in the office anyways. I said, I'll be in Texas. We're going to be doing cool stuff. And you guys continue to do this and, see how that goes. When we got to Texas, it worked. California was running real well. Like it was basically funding. We bought a house. We lived there. It was funding all our bills. Like I wasn't even working, anywhere else. But then it started to crumble because I wasn't there. I wasn't there to keep the morale up and keep the community going and motivated. It just slowly started to dwindle. So I saw this coming, and I decided to get my master license in Texas, and then we opened up a second location in Texas so that I can try to alleviate some of the income pains, to help support California and then grow that company. And then about a year later, we closed California.
Yeah, what were some of the signs you saw, and how long did it take before you saw those signs that you really knew this was going somewhere you couldn't control?
It was giving a lot of power to the employees.
Mm.
They had the credit cards. They were able to go in and out of the supply houses. I kind of just let them make the decisions based on the jobs. We had like 16 guys, so it was kind of hard to monitor what was going in and out. Um, the checks and balances kind of left, before I can just roll up on a job site and check things out, see how things are going, and see what their attitudes are like. And it wasn't there anymore, so they kind of did their own thing, went a little rogue, wasn't finishing jobs, or they would just tell me in the meetings like everything's going really well when it wasn't. They didn't tell me that when they were running the trencher, they hit the main water line at a project and it flooded. I found out when I saw the bill. So just little things like that I wasn't able to have a full grasp on and regulate on. Because the boss is in another state. Like, what's he gonna do? So, so before it got completely wrecked, I just wound it down.
When dad's away, the children will play. Okay, what does winding it down look like? How did you handle that, if you don't mind me asking?
We were on this apartment job. I think it was going to be our last project, and I told my main guy like, "Hey, this is going to be our last project, and then you can do other stuff that's smaller." And then basically the word got around that we were going to close up, so everybody started to scatter. So I had to hire in a subcontracting company to finish up the last little parts of this project. But yeah, winding it down was really just trying to make sure all of our bills were paid and the suppliers were settled. We ended up spending more money closing it down than keeping it afloat because there was just a bunch of legal documents and paperwork and stuff to just kind of finish up, which I wasn't even good at doing. So I had to hire a guy to do that too.
What about like the phone? Was it still ringing? Was there still people trying to get you to do work? What do you do with?
I got with one of my other friends that had an electric contractor company, and I just told him, our customers would call and they said they want to see us. They need, they need work, and I was like, hey, we've shifted out to Texas, so I'm gonna refer you over to one of our really good company friends that super solid company. So we would just start referring to those guys, which was good for them. They kind of blew up because of that. They got a lot of extra customers. Yeah, we're still friends now. We chat a lot. But yeah, the wind down was rough. And it was around the same time I was starting to get the Texas company up and going. So there was a transition of, hey, I think we made a mistake and we're probably going to be poor and it's not going to work out. But me and my wife are like, hey, we did it once. How hard could it be? Like, so I just followed the same path. Everything I did over there in the beginning, I started doing in Texas. And like, I did the parking lot lights. I called the property man. I literally did every single thing. I joined all the groups, and it almost can't not work. I mean,
I gotta stop you for a second, because is there a way we can just bottle your enthusiasm and sell it? Because that is top tier. Hey, we already failed once. Let's just we're fine. We'll do it again. How hard could it be? That's amazing level of resilience. Like, you're saying it so nonchalant, but like, do you give yourself credit for having almost this unshakable resolve to succeed? Like, this is the real superpower here. You just did not believe you could fail, and as a result, you didn't fail. You actually like succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. Like, how do you feel about this?
I don't think about it, and I get questions like that all the time. Failure just isn't in my mindset. I mean,
Mhm.
failure means not being able to feed my family, not being able to pay our bills. Like, that's literally not an option. So I could either look at it as a very stressful thing and say, oh my gosh, if I don't do this, like bad things are going to happen. Or I can say, dude, you just wait. just give us a couple more days. Like, we're gonna fucking knock it out of the park. We're gonna just like, it's gonna work. Like, it has to work. You know, we've already done this before. There's no reason it wouldn't work again. And it was pretty accurate.
You should be proud. You genuinely should be proud. I mean, you have my respect. If for nothing else than that, I mean, you have tons of my respect regardless, but you've earned it even then some more for this one particular thing. It's amazing. Really, really impressed.
So what happens next, man? I know it's not all rays of sunshine beyond this. Maybe this is
Awesome.
your biggest challenge we're just getting into now.
Well, we ran Keil Electric out in Texas. It was a second location. We ended up having to close Keil Electric, or at least the brand, down because there was a lot of conflict with the California Keil Electric. There was, you know, people online were thinking it was the same company. They were calling, so like we ended up switching. I rebranded to another company called Live Oak Electric, and it was actually pretty easy to switch. You just call every customer and say we rebranded. That wasn't a problem, and we did that for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and super successful. Every, you know, service related, service and repair. We did a couple ADUs, a couple house builds, you know, each year. But it was mostly service and repair at that time, because that's when I started getting the shift of like, hey, this is actually a little bit easier, similar amount of money. So we got into that space. And then around 2000, we were having our third child. My wife was pregnant. Like, we're super healthy. Like, anyway, she had like a little, like a bump on her toe. We thought it was like a cyst or something. So she said, you know, after the baby's born, I'll just go to the dermatologist and we'll get it removed. So, you know, super successful home birth, child. He was born, beautiful baby boy. And then, you know, she went to the dermatologist to get it removed, and they were looking at it and they said, we don't know what this is. So they took a sample and sent it in. And about a week later, we found out that she had stage 4 melanoma cancer. And at the time, we were like, there's no way, like, we're the healthiest people that we know. You know, we don't eat garbage, and, you know, we live in a brand new house, you know. But then they said, you know, she only has like 3 months to live, you know, like, it's everywhere. Like, we can't even stop it. It's so aggressive. So we were like, what can we do? And they said you could do chemo and radiation, and, you know, that's kind of it, you know, start settling your affairs and say goodbye to people. And like, it was kind of an unacceptable answer for us. So we just did a lot of research, and there was a lot of things that we can do outside the country. So we started going everywhere. I went to Mexico. I was flying back and forth to Russia to pick up viruses, to come back to the States to inject her. And we actually got it from a stage 4 spread all over her body to like a very, very, very small, like size of a nickel tumor in her liver. And we're like, told you, Western medicine, you guys suck. Like, there's ways to cure things. So um, the cancer doctor said, you know, it's so small, like, we could just hit it with like a little bit of, just a tiny bit of radiation and make it go away, and you guys will be done. And like, we were really hesitant. We're like, you know, we've done this so far without any of the, you know, crazy stuff. But somehow we got talked. I don't know if we got talked into it, or we were battling it for like a year. You know, we went from a 4-month death sentence to, you know, not a death sentence. So we decided to do that. They did this little microscopic laser on it, and then it did something where it just was this small, and it blasted all over her body, and she died in 5 days. So that time, like, curing her and battling that took me away from the company for about, I mean, almost a year. Like, the guys were just running on their own, and like, I was always out of the country doing crazy stuff with my wife, trying to just get her better. But when that happened, I was like, I'm not coming back. And I had 3 little kids. So I had the newborn, and I think it was 3-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. And before my wife died, she said, because we worked so hard building the company, like we never took vacation. We didn't do anything. We just focused on the business. She said, if I die, I want you to take the kids on a vacation. So after she passed, I bought a giant dually truck and a fifth wheel, and I threw all the kids in there, and we traveled for almost a year all over the States. We just did a lot of healing, in like forests and national parks, and it was really good. Um, One thing I found out maybe a few months after my son was born was that he was born blind and deaf. We didn't know because he couldn't talk and he didn't like verbalize. So like that was a devastating thing for us. But anyways, we started traveling. A really good friend of mine in San Diego said, "Hey, come visit us, while you're traveling when you can come through here and just hang out." So we got to San Diego, and he's a big church guy. I never did anything like that. I didn't even know what any of that stuff was, but he said, "Hey, we're going to church tonight. I think you should come." And I go, "It'd be good for you guys." And I was like, "No, we'll just wait here, until you guys get back." He's like, "No, you're going to come to church. You need this." So we went to church, and it was great for us. I was exposed to stuff I didn't know existed. And then we ended up staying about 3 months, and we went to church every Wednesday and Sunday. It was great. My kids went to the kids' church. Uh, all the kids' church people knew my blind and deaf son because he was the only guy that was blind and deaf. And I finally said, we got to keep traveling. Like, we're not done going on our healing journey. So everybody in the church came out. They prayed over us. They said, safe travels. It was good to see you. And we left San Diego and we got up to one of the national parks, Yosemite. And so we're sitting there, me and the kids sitting there in the RV, and my blind son he's like holding, I don't know, I think it was like a Lego or something. Normally he just holds it and looks, just like looking, anywhere. But he was like focusing on what was in his hand. And I was like, what is that? Like, are you looking at that? That's weird because it's not possible. He doesn't have optic nerves. He literally doesn't have the cord that goes from the eyeball to the brain. So he's doing this. So I took it out of his hand and I held it in my hand. And he grabbed it out of my hand and held it back in his face and was doing this again. We did this for like an hour. And I'm crying. And I'm like, dude, you could see. So I called my buddy who brought me to church in San Diego. I was like, dude, Mason can see. And the only thing he ever said was like, dude, God is good. Don't you remember we prayed for you? Dude, I just hung up because I didn't even know how to respond to that. And then I found out a couple of weeks later that he could hear because he was like walking towards like some stairs. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And he stopped and he turned around and looked at me. And I started doing this to him. Like, he's like looking at everywhere there, hears the sound. So I'm like that was the time, around that time was like when I was like, dude, God is real. I think I'm going to buy into all this Christian stuff. And I mean, I kind of left it at that. I didn't really do much after that, but we were in South Dakota, and one of the girls from the church called, and she's like, "Hey, just wanted to check in on you," and heard Mason could see, and I was like, "Yeah." So we talked a long time, like, and we started talking every day, and then we kind of fell in love over the phone. And she's like, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool if you came down this year for Thanksgiving or Christmas and hang out with us?" So I was like, "Dude, we live in an RV. We could do whatever we want." So we just came back down to San Diego, and we never left. I ended up marrying her about less than a year. And she'd been single with her two daughters for, I don't know, 8 years. And, you know, her kids are awesome and our kids are awesome. Now we have 5 kids together, and like we're ridiculously in love. And uh, we started, my guys in Texas were like, "Dude, if you're not coming back, you should definitely start another company where you're at so that we can have more exposure." So around that time, I started another company, and it was about the time I met Forrest. And then we have another partner named Jaron who goes to our church. That's how I met everybody, through the church. Again, bringing in fruit. And Forrest and Jaron were going to buy a company out in Florida. And I said, hey, we know your master license. Get your license in Florida. We have a big opportunity out there. And I said, so okay. So I got my license in Florida. And we were getting ready to move. And I think the last couple of weeks before the deal was closed, they canceled. I don't know what happened. We just ended up not doing that deal. So I told Forrest, dude, I already have everything here. Let's start a company here. And then that's how Keil Electric was born. And we've been doing that since.
Wow. First off, speechless, and just, like I said before, absolute, the most miraculous, and just the most chicken skin I've ever had listening to a story, and my condolences. It's just speaking for myself. What a difficult series of events that you've gone through to get to this point. But to Joe's credit earlier, even before you guys, Joe's never heard this story before. I had a bit of a sneak peek, but to what Joe said before, just your ability to stay focused and stay forward. And I can say, I share one thing with you, and it's that I had a pretty dark time once upon a time, and being a dad is what kept me moving forward. And the only question I have before Joe definitely probably has something to say, but is, how is Mason now?
He is your normal 5-year-old punk kid. He's he's a little delayed in his development because he couldn't see or hear for the first year and a half of his life. So, but no, he's great. I mean, he's like a master at puzzles and he builds Legos. He's just what a normal little kid would be doing. So, which is amazing. He does have some slight vision impairment where he doesn't see peripherals, but he could see. The doctors don't know. They think, oh, maybe it's slightly developing. We're actually supposed to get a brain scan on him here in the next couple months to kind of see what that looks like. But last brain scan, it was non-existent. They said they don't understand how he could see. They compared it it's like being born without an arm, but still being able to pick up a cup of coffee. It's not possible. So I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. The last one was he doesn't have optic nerves, and now he could see, and I'm just happy he could see. So
I'm still trying to process how to explain and communicate the feelings attached to it. I mean, first and foremost, thanks be to God. Goes without saying. There's literally no argument there. The things that are possible through faith and through belief in the highest of powers is proven. It's completely proven. It's just amazing when you hear such a real, intangible example that came from such a place of struggle and ended up becoming one of the best blessings. That which was meant to hit you could never miss you, and that was meant to miss you could never hit you. It's just amazing to see where your path is lying and how much blessings is in your path ahead of you. Your unstoppable resilience, the optimism, the resilience to never quit. And then regardless of the hand you've been dealt, you turn it into a flush every time. Thanks be to God. That's really all I can say.
Joe, I know that you got a class,
Yeah,
I
4
guess, in a
minutes.
few minutes,
Yes.
right? So that's okay, man. You can drop, but Andy, are you able to stay on for another 15 just to finish up?
Yeah. If I do have to drop, which I'm going to head out in the next minute or so, I just want to say, if nothing else, Andy, it is the highest of pleasures getting the opportunity to hear your story. There are some things that people are willing to say in front of a crowd, and there are some things people keep to themselves. And I feel like this is a story that more people need to hear, because you don't hear about wins like this outside of movies. They exist, don't get me wrong, but the level of depth that this went and where you ended up on the other side of it and the lessons you've learned and the lives you've touched and impacted along the way, it's almost like throwing a rock into a river and we're just trying to count the ripples, but they're countless and they just keep going in every direction. It's truly amazing. And I'm honored to have the opportunity to have heard your story directly from you. I'll leave at this point. I do have to run, but I want to say, if nothing else, maybe continue to be blessed with peace and mercy and guidance. I mean, it's phenomenal what you've done, and I wish the Almighty continues blessing you in that way. So my pleasure. Clay, nothing but love, brother.
Cheers, man. We'll talk to you
Thanks,
about.
man. You too.
Holy cow.
See ya.
Okay. So you're in California. We've got Keil Electric. You're starting over with Forrest now and Jaron on your team. Things start picking up. See, I think this is around the time that we came together.
Correct.
One of our clients, the Yoder clan, had introduced us to
Yep.
Jaron, I believe, first.
Yeah. They're good friends with Vincent, and they said, hey, there's these service loop guys. They give a class. They'll teach you how to be even cooler than you are now. You know, we were just starting, so we're like, hey, anything helps. You know, let's figure out what our rate should be. Let's figure out, you know, how to calculate stuff and talk to people. And yeah, that's how we met. We went in the class. It was great. Actually changed the direction on how we started growing. And then we just kept growing. Like we're still growing right now. We have our struggles. I mean, like any other company, I'm sure, but you know, at least we have a target, you know, and it keeps moving. We keep adjusting to try to adapt.
When you first started in residential service at this point, I mean, I get there was a ton of weight, but also sounds like some new energy for you. You were excited to go again, right? Did you know at that point it was going to be residential service? Because you're kind of talking to Forrest then at this time?
Um, we were going back and
Mhm.
forth. I've been into, you know, I'll do anything that is electrical, you know, build houses, you know, anything that was electrical, I would say yes to. You know, I got a really big, robust bidding software, so I can take
Yeah,
blueprints and bid them out easily. So like I'm used to doing all those things, and then the goal was to be service and residential repair. Um, so I struggled with that a little bit because you know we were waiting for leads to come in, and I had a handful of big projects I could bid. So I'm like, you know, what do I do? I don't want to just say no to these guys because I could see the money there. And we're just kind of waiting to grow this side. So uh, we did both, and we're still kind of doing both, but we're being a little more selective. But by far, service and repair residential is the direction that we want to go towards 100%.
nice, nice. And so when you first started out, I think Forrest mentioned you guys were, obviously it was an early kind of a restart. You're doing like 8, 10K months maybe at first, and then you got together and started seeing some upticks, right?
Yeah, when we first started, it was really sad. Like three, maybe 5 grand a month. Um, yeah, and then Forrest got in and started dialing all the marketing and advertising in, and then calls just started coming in like nonstop. And it got to the point where I was like, I can't be in the field this much and come back into the office and try to do boss things. So then we started hiring guys.
Mm, nice. Nice. Did you have a challenge? I know you mentioned the pricing is probably different, the service pricing, than what you're used to in projects and what your rate was. Did you have a challenge with that difference at all and actually, offering that to people at that rate, or was that a challenge for you at all?
Um, well, project rate is much, much lower than, you know, service and repair. The biggest challenge, like when we met you guys, was you know what we were charging per hour is probably like any other new coming in electrician was you know real basic, you know, $150 an hour, you know, and I was really mostly thinking of it from a customer's perspective. You know, that's a lot of money to change this plug. um, and then when we got to learning about what it took to run a business, and not only run it but like grow it and plan for future growth and checks, you know, that number was more than doubled, you know, once we ran it through your calculator. So the challenge there was presenting that number to the customer, knowing that the majority of our time before that was a much, much lower rate. So it took a minute to believe in it, you know, going there and showing this large number and not believing in it, or if I was thinking it was too high, it was always a failed sale, you know, because they could see it, they could feel it, you know, I was vibrating, you know, a disbelief of my own number. Um, it wasn't until I said, you know, this is what it has to be if we want to project growth and become amazing. Like it has to be this number. But once we flipped that switch, it was as if we never raised our prices. The customer just said yes. You know, it was a short transition.
Have you had guys now, because you've been through a few, you've got a good little crew going now. Have you had guys that have had troubles getting on board with that?
I would say more than half.
More than half. Okay. Do you have a preferred way that you're dealing with it or helping them get over that and find confidence like you did?
Yeah, I'm like really transparent. We say, hey, this is what it costs to get in a lead. This is what it costs to send you out in a truck. You know, Maintenance the truck, the insurances and everything. Like that alone puts us at this number. So they can see that and they're like, oh, okay, I get it. And then I say, hey, if you want to make more money or you have growth or get a raise in the future, we have to charge this much money. Like we have to be not only making a profit, but setting up the future for future profitability, uh, and to get more support and more guys. So when they see that aspect of it, it's easier for them to take it and run with it. A new guy coming in that we just hire and we say, hey, our hourly rate is $456 an hour. They're like, holy crap, dude, nobody's gonna buy. And like you gotta change their mindset because when they're out there selling, like they think it's too high. And they just don't have the confidence in the sell.
Yeah, and it depends on your local area. I mean, we've seen people upwards of over 650 an hour even. But you know what? Those are the companies running all Mercedes-Benz Sprinter vans, the full wraps from Kickcharge, right? Like if you want that premium brand and everything, all the nuts, like that's just what it takes. It's not cheap to do that. But look how attractive it is. It gets so many people on board and builds confidence and people see you and you become this community figure with this killer brand. So I've seen that work just the same. Yeah, it makes perfect sense what you're saying, man. What would you say is like your record month now to come from that 3, 5, 8, 10K months?
It's a question for Forrest, but I believe we did. I probably messed this up. I believe we did almost 100 this last month, or I could be way off. I lean on him a lot for the finances. I just run around and get people to say yes, help us.
Yeah, leads me to the next questions anyway. So I think he mentioned you guys had a record 165 and you kind of float around that 100 or just over at this point.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That said, a lot of people kind of second guess the whole partnership thing, or I've had them say to me, I mean, I've got partners too, obviously, and Joseph, first and foremost. The fastest sinking ship is a partnership. Have you ever heard that?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that phrase and how are you feeling about the partnership that you're in today?
I would say about that phrase, it really depends on your partner and what your guys' alliance is and, who's doing what and how do you stick to those positions. In my case, having Forrest and Jaren has been a complete game changer. You know, Forrest brings stuff to my world that I never even knew about or heard about. And when I hear it, I'm like in just complete awe of like what he knows and what he does. And in our partnership, he says he's going to do certain things. Like it always happens, you know. Like it's gotten to the point where I look to him for guidance in a lot of these areas, and then he leans on me for guidance in areas where he's not familiar with. So he has a lot of structure and just ways to go about certain things that just go perfectly hand in hand with how I do it. So the partnership is amazing. I mean, I wish I met Forrest 10 years ago, although he probably would have been like 15. So it wouldn't have worked out.
There's the age giveaway. But that's what I was going to ask because you've had versions of Keil Electric, and I can't remember the name you said of the other one, but you've had these different versions, these iterations, and at those times you had your wife, but not other business partners, right? So if you had the choice of doing this one way or the other, sounds like by what you just said, you would go with the partner again.
I would, I mean, like I said, it has to be the right person. They have to be able to bring something to the table that the other guy either can't do or doesn't know how to do or doesn't have the time. But you really got to be able to come in together, like he handles everything in this lane and I handle everything in this lane and they're going in the same direction. And without them both going, like you would be half lost. I mean, it's a really beautiful relationship that we have. I've heard stories of other guys with partners and, somebody's not pulling their weight or not being transparent. And then you just start building feelings that you don't want to have and, they end but, um, I'd say getting a partner, you want to go in and just lay everything on the table. Like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what you're going to do. And this is how we're going to get to our goal and, hold each other accountable, you know, keep that culture nice and loving.
Yep, absolutely. And I've been asked a few times too, what's the key points you'd have to check off in a partnership? And I know for Joe and I, it was a couple of things. I recognized right away that I'm more the generalist, the bigger vision, high in the sky guy. He's definitely more the specialist, knows every single nut and bolt that puts this thing together when it comes to a process, as you know as well, right? Every question also has the why we ask it in every part of the process. And that's all there because of him. And because I think we have very little overlap, we just do very different things for our business. And at the end of the day, I feel like what you said, I agree with, is that where people tend to share skill sets too, and they have more overlap in the things they're meant to do, it tends to be more arguments about those things as well. And yeah, the ethics of not going through and doing what you said you were going to do. You ever heard that expression? Uh, great great fences make great neighbors. And then there's another one, good contracts make good friends.
I have heard that one.
Yeah, yeah, just kind of interesting way to look at it. It's that whole ideology though of like, okay, is a prenuptial agreement really something to be upset about? And one of the things that was important for us in our partnership, I know, was planning. What does a divorce look like? What are our duties? Yes. What is all the stuff we're committing to? Yes. But also, hey, if we do separate for unknown reasons, what does that look like? So we don't have to worry about it or fight about it then.
It's good to know.
That was like really cool and easy to do. Yeah. So what's the goal for Keil Electric, Andy? How big is this going, do you think? Where do you see it?
Well, we just opened up a second location in Austin, Texas. Um, I would like to just keep growing and get bigger and more profitable, and maybe, if it makes sense at some point, either sell it and do this again because it's fun, or just keep it going and have a nice income every month. So I'm pretty flexible. We've had talks about bringing in other trades to kind of have a multi-trade company. I don't know enough to be a fan yet. I get the idea and the concept. I know that a lot of big companies are doing that. I'm just so much more focused in this one trade. It's hard for me to think in that ways. But our other partner, Jaron, is a very, very big believer in that. So, and like Forrest, Jaron is a professional in that world, so I just trust him and his word on. So, when we get there, we'll know. Until then, I'm happy building a business. One day I'd like to retire and just play, but I also don't know if I'm the type of person that could sit still.
Me too, man. Me too. So it sounds like you're sleeping better at night. Partnership is all good stuff for you guys, and you've got tons of positive stuff in the future. I do want to thank you for sharing all the vulnerable stuff today, and I want to ask you one last hard question, if I could. Say one of your kids decides that they're going to do similar to what you've done and start a business, start an electrical business specifically. Maybe it's Mason, continues to be a miracle, follows in your footsteps. What three pieces of advice do you think are like your top? I got to get this to him so that he doesn't do some of the things I did or so that he does better than I did. Do you have a few ideas that could help others who or maybe look into his path?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking electrical specific, I would say first and foremost, he needs to get into a good company that can teach him how to be an electrician, maybe a good trade school. because without the knowledge of doing electrical, like you'd be a really sorry business guy in that trade. But second would be, you know, I put in all the work to find out what works and what doesn't work. So I would immediately get him into a position of saying, like, this is how you're going to get the work. This is how we're going to figure out what your pricing is. You know, I'd probably get somebody like Forrest to say, hey, we have another guy that's going to do something. But, you know, going through all the trial and errors, like, you just know it works. Just like when I repeated the company and how I got customers in the end, like, you know, we've developed a shortcut. Like, you guys have developed a shortcut to go from starter company to $1 million service van. You know, I would point them in those directions first.
Yeah, I appreciate the confidence. I know we didn't have it when we were first coming up. It wasn't so readily available. We couldn't necessarily just throw on YouTube and learn how to build a multi-million dollar electrical brand. So yeah, it's a different time, man. I appreciate that. You've been an awesome guest, Andy. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And a quick shameless plug from me, guys. We've got a ton more great interviews coming in this season. As I mentioned last time, you can join the SLE Pro app at electricserviceapp.com. And you can come in there and set yourself up and join a community. In fact, we'll put a trial link below so that you can use a coupon even to get into what we call the open circuit, where Joe and I do a live Q&A session every week. You've got Academy access to the basics that Andy mentioned today about learning your pricing, and what Dorian mentioned last time, even the basic process of the loop method to help you guys out there, as well as hundreds of other electricians doing it too, and doing it right and building this thing strong. It's so much easier when you're in the community. So come join us, and we'll see you guys again in there and next time here on the podcast. Cheers to your success.